Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people who are working in the trenches to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, we're going to be spending the whole hour today with my friend Ashley Edwards. We'll come to him in just a second and just talk about some current events and just, have one of those kind of round robin discussions where we don't know what's going to come up. I want to share a couple of quotes with you that I've been kind of saving up, and they're all really good. The first one, and these all come from my digital history book. English novelist Virginia Woolf died back in 1941, in April of 1941, and she once said this: "We cannot grow fine flowers in a thin soil. We cannot grow fine flowers in a thin soil." Whether it's great writers or successful people, they're always going to tell you that, and I've said this on the show before, there's no such thing as skipping steps. You gotta go do your time. You gotta work hard. You gotta learn through hard knocks and adversity. And by gaining that understanding, those experiences, that wisdom, you become, better able to deal with whatever the next thing that will be thrown at you will deal you. I just think that's a good one. Here's one from Patty Dukes. Let's see, what was the historic event? She died, unfortunately, back in 2016. She said this: Sometimes it is the simplest, seemingly most inane, most practical stuff that matters the most to someone's. I love that. Getting back to the simplicities of life. We all need to be reminded of that. Here's one that came from Good Quote, and I love it because I think it's so true. It said this: "The healer also needs healing. The planner also needs surprises. The giver also needs to receive. The thoughtful also needs to be thought of. And the considerate also needs to be considered." Isn't that true? We should spend more time thinking about the people who are around us and what it is that they need. Because, I've got healers around me and planners around me and givers and thoughtful people and considerate people around me. I probably should reach out to them more and see what they need. That's kind of a good reminder of that. And let's see, I think I have one more. Let me get through all this stuff here. Yeah, it was from Marvin Gaye. I love this one. He was shot and killed by his father back in 1984. Boy, could he sing. But anyway, if you cannot find peace within yourself, you will never find it anywhere else. And that kind of reminds me of the conversations that I had with Robbie D'Angelo about, we have to think about what's going on inside us to help us ultimately feel good about ourselves externally. But if you cannot find peace within yourself, you'll never find it anywhere else. I think we should all be always working hard to find peace within ourselves. That is for sure. Okay, now let's move over to my friend Ashley Edwards. He's an entrepreneur, the former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. He's also a contributor to SuperTalk Mississippi News and someone I enjoy kind of touching base with from time to time. How you doing, Ashley?
I'm doing great, Ricky. Thanks for having me on this morning. Good to see you.
It's been interesting weather here in coastal Mississippi. A little warm days and then some cool nights, and I think we have some cool nights coming back again. But it's just typical spring. But it is a beautiful time to live on the bay, isn't it?
The changing of the seasons is so kind of amazing. And when you think about it, we kind of live in a geographic place that only really has two seasons. It's either kind of cool or it's warm. And, we don't get that traditional fall like some folks do. It kind of goes from winter to summer really quickly. But these few weeks that we get of a real spring, it's amazing to see all the trees blooming and, of course, the pollen. As I have gotten older, I have realized that allergies are just a fact of life for me this time of year, and the pollen can be absolutely overwhelming. I went out and washed my truck a few days ago, and I think it sat for about 2 days, and it's normally black. It was yellow again with pollen, so you can't escape it in this part of the country.
What's interesting is I've really personally never had trouble with it. But I've been out. I went out and did my entire yard, and it was kind of the first kind of like deep work that I did. So a lot of edging and whatever. And I've actually fought a little bit of a sinus issue, and I had to take some antibiotics. Hey, the pain behind my eyes. I've never had that before, and has it all the time. But I finally kind of got over it. But to go out there in one like 3 or 4 hour, swing through the yard the way that I did, man, I paid for it. And listen, we over Easter, we always enjoy, we'll have Ann's family over for Easter, and we go outside and play cornhole and ladder golf and, frisbee golf and all the things like that. And Ann went out and just played ladder golf for maybe, 30 minutes. And man, she's paying dearly for it. I mean, you look at look up, look at the oak trees. And by the way, some of the worst pollen comes from grass as the grass is growing. It's finer, but it is we tend to be very allergic to it. But coastal Mississippi, it's just literally blooming, man. I mean, the green is just bursting. If you look down at the edge of the marsh, it's starting to grow like wildfire. We're definitely into the spring in a big way here in coastal Mississippi.
Well, the drought that we had last year, which was very historic, and it's kind of become a thing of the past now. I mean, we've had a lot of rain. The drought has eased a lot over the wintertime. It was a very wet winter, and it doesn't look like going forward we're going to see a repeat of what we saw last year. But it was really unprecedented. Especially through the summer and fall months last year, how little rainfall we had, and it seems like this year is going to flip the switch on us pretty quickly. And of course, something that you and I talk a lot about and watch very closely is tropical weather, and all of the early projections, the climatologist models that are looking toward the summer and late summer and early fall suggest this could be a very active hurricane season. So, we're about to get back into the same kind of watch and wait pattern that we have in this part of the world. And this could be one of those big years when we see a lot of storms and some very strong ones. The climatologists are seeing sinking air. And when you start seeing the general pattern of air sinking over the Atlantic basin and over the Gulf, it can create, sort of greater incubation for these tropical systems. And it looks like that we're going to see that this year, perhaps on par with what we saw back in 2005 and some of those years when we saw real active seasons. So it's going to be very interesting to watch.
It's, it's always, scary to look at the possibilities this time of year. Of course, as you and I have talked about before, it only takes one. It takes one, and you do. What's interesting is you and I are kind of weather nerds, so we share that a lot. And I've a lot of close friends and family members who pay attention to me during the tropical season. They don't worry about something until I worry about it. You've got people who feel the same way about you. We watch the models and all of that. But the work that you're in, man, you get this. You're in the recovery, still in the disaster recovery business, and you get to see what other communities are dealing with. And what's interesting about that, Ashley, is that we've had this. If you go back over the last 10 years, the number of major storms that have hit the United States here on the Gulf of Mexico, especially, and the kind of damage they left. It's amazing how fast the news cycle shifts. We get a little bit of burst. And then nothing. And then you see what's left behind as these people struggle to work their way through that. It's kind of the sad reality of a major storm, isn't it?
It is. And I tell you, people in coastal Mississippi have a lot of empathy for what these folks have gone through, because you're right. Long after these storms are off of the headlines, in many cases, these communities are just starting their recovery process. I mean, look, you can drive through East Biloxi today and you can still see water and sewer work that are FEMA projects from Katrina in 2005. And so, in some cases, these projects go on and on for a long period of time. And, I think what I think is often lost on the people of the Gulf Coast is we had an incredible sort of leg up in our recovery from Katrina because we had a federal government that was so cooperative. We had a White House that was so committed to seeing it through. And we had a lot of advantages that a lot of these communities don't have. And so, the disaster recovery world has gotten far harder, more prescriptive. Since the days of Katrina, a lot of the things that we see today in other communities were kind of built on the backs of the lessons learned from Hurricane Katrina. And it is very, very tough, and it disrupts people's livelihoods and their lives for many, many, many years. And so, it's something that every time we go into this part of the year, I know that, even if it doesn't happen here, it's going to happen somewhere. And likely because of what I do professionally, we're going to intersect with that in some way. So it's not something that's fun to look forward to.
No, it isn't. It isn't. Unfortunately, if it's going to be a busy season, somebody's going to get it. Just hope it's not us. I'm enjoying the lull, to be quite honest with you. I didn't have to move my boats one time last year, which is, I think that's the first in a long time. Hey, when we come back with Ashley Edwards, we're going to talk about the latest at X, formerly Twitter. See what's happening in that world these days. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have my friend Ashley Edwards with us, and he's a SuperTalk Mississippi contributor, entrepreneur, and former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council, and someone I really enjoy visiting with. Ashley, you and I have talked a lot about X and free speech. You're a former journalist. I spent a career in working at media companies, and I feel I have such a strong belief in the First Amendment, and we've had so many conversations about that. But I get a kick out of watching Elon Musk do his life. He doesn't care what anyone thinks about him. He just what you're going to get the stream of thought. And so in between, talking about Falcon 9 and SpaceX and the amazing work that they're doing at Tesla and how they're going to conquer AI as it relates to driving and all that he's doing there. In between all of that, he has time to send out texts about CNN. Like, for example, one of the things he said, Babylon Bee published a story that said CNN publishes real news story on April Fool's Day, and he retweeted it and just had a laughing emoji with it. He just doesn't care, man. And you start to get deep into how many people he's touching. 179.6 million followers. Oh, man, with this dude, when he posts, he's talking to a big audience all around the world. But he's living his belief in the First Amendment. That is for sure.
He's an interesting guy, someone that I have followed very closely over a lot of years. Really before he was on a lot of people's radar. I was really interested in what he was doing with Tesla, and just frankly, very curious about whether that model would work. I mean, you think about if you're an investor and you hear some of his early pitches, whether it be for something like Tesla or something like SpaceX, it's really kind of the question is really out on whether or not these things are going to be commercially successful. And so what he's done is nothing short of astounding. He's a true innovator and a disruptor in the market. Look, there are a lot of times that I look at some of what he does, and I can look at it as kind of a fan of Elon Musk and say, hey, go get him, Elon. This is great. I also kind of look at it as a shareholder of some of his companies and say, boy, I wish he would avoid the culture wars to a little greater extent. But on the same note, you take any of this stuff at a singular snapshot in time, and it's difficult to get the full picture, because what his vision is for his companies and the way he has integrated the technologies and the innovation that he has, he is truly a guy who is a visionary for what the next phase of humanity is going to look like. And he has created a commercial infrastructure around trying to commercialize that. Tesla was never just about the electric car. It had a lot more to do with the fact that he wanted to eliminate human drivers from cars and create the technology around full self-driving. And so the ultimate vision that he's going to have for Tesla is going to be less about the electrification and more about the fact that cars will be completely autonomous. In fact, I saw a tweet that he made last night where he said, it won't be long until humanity looks back and cannot believe the fact that there was ever a human being behind the wheel of a car. His visions for SpaceX wasn't just to get government contracts to provide, new propulsion systems. It was to try to create a commercial infrastructure around making humanity an interplanetary species in this generation. And so much, I think, of the story of his life and the companies he's created are going to be told 20 or 30 years in the future, when we see kind of the full evolution of what these things are going to go through. And X is exactly the same way. He did not intend to just simply buy a social media company so he could be in the social media space. He was buying a platform that he could evolve into something that would be a central hub of sort of human knowledge, data, and information going forward. And so we have only seen, I think, a snapshot of what all of his visions will ultimately become. I think that's really important to keep in mind when you talk about Elon Musk, because we have not seen the full playbook yet.
His mind is amazing. And you and I have talked about this so many times, but I'm completely blown away by how he's such a visionary. How does he pay attention to so much and still do what he does? And how does he do it? And how does he keep it all straight? I mean, it's literally a modern day genius, visionary beyond anything we probably have seen before, doing what he does. Is just incredible. But he's involved too in sort of the day-to-day work that's happening at X. But it's like, if you watch have you sort of paid attention to the evolution of community notes and what they're trying to do there, and with their efforts to get this rating system put together so that we can have higher confidence in higher confidence scores and ratings that people give. And this is what he said what the community notes part of X has been constantly kind of rolling out. And the goal is to try to create more credibility and more truth. But he said it this way: as always, this is 3 days ago, as always, suggestions for improving community notes are much appreciated. The aspiration of this platform is to be by far the best source of truth on earth. Nothing will ever be perfect, but we shall strive to be less wrong every day. Man, I'm pulling for him. And I think that putting these kinds of things in place are going to make a big difference. Listen, let's face it. The reason that he was able to reduce the staff, 80% was, the last number. How can you reduce the staff by that much and still even produce a company? It's because Twitter had built into its system all of these biases. They wanted only certain points of view to come forward, what they believed to be right. And so all of these internal processes had to be put in place to deliver on that goal. And he said that is the absolutely anti First Amendment, to put those kinds of things in place. He did away with that. And he's going to be more open sourcing, more related, more rating systems for people who are delivering news and information. And, advertisers are starting to come back to them. Their traffic continues to grow. No one's going to be able to touch where this company is headed, are they? And you know what? This is just in the current iteration. Of course, you and I have had long discussions about developing a super app, which is where they're ultimately headed. But just in terms of its First Amendment work, I mean, no one's going to be able to touch him.
Well, look, Elon Musk, based on his track record, has got to be a guy that you can't bet against. It is astounding what he has been able to do. And of course, he gets a lot of credit. He is the leader. He's the visionary at the top. He's also surrounded by incredibly talented people. Back in 2004, when I was working in economic development, I was heavily involved in recruiting SpaceX's Raptor engine testing program to Stennis Space Center, and got to know very personally a number of the top SpaceX employees. And I can say without hesitation, those were some of the most capable and competent people that I have ever interacted with in my life. And so if, the question of how does Elon Musk do it, part of the answer is he has surrounded himself with incredible people, some of the top people in their fields that are really out there. He's been an acquirer of talent. And, that's what's amazing. You take a guy with this incredible vision, a disruptor who does not go with the flow, a guy who has proven success. I mean, keep in mind, when we're talking about Elon Musk in 2024, it's not a question of will he be successful or not. He's proven himself despite all odds. I mean, to take Tesla, I remember in 2008, Ricky, I think it was 2008, maybe 2007, when I was working in the governor's office, and Tesla was doing a road show, bringing the first iteration of kind of their concept car around, and I got to see one of the early versions of it. To think about what I saw that day, and that 10, 12 years later, they were the largest automobile manufacturer in the world, displacing all of these legacy companies that had been learning how to do it and perfect it over 100 years. That is an astounding story of economic success by any measure. And so, you can't bet against the guy because of what he's already shown he can do. You add to that the fact that he's got some of the most talented people in the world working around him to implement his vision. He's going to be a true disruptor in our economy and in our world. And 50 years from now, historians will look back at him the way that we look back at a Henry Ford or an Alexander Graham Bell or a Nikola Tesla. I mean, he's going to be a guy that's going to fundamentally change our economy and our world.
It's interesting. He's so well read, and he remembers everything that he read. So when he gets in conversations about the fall of the Roman Empire and things like that, and he looks at the experiment, which is the United States of America, and how short our history is, and he puts it in the perspective of history as we know it. He has a way of kind of stepping back from the situation and making incredibly important observations about what we're seeing in the world today and why it's important. I can't hear enough of what he has to say about that. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Ashley Edwards. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have my friend Ashley Edwards with us. When we went to break, it's hard not to get into a conversation about Elon Musk and how he's impacting our world in so many different ways. And if you haven't really kind of taken the time to study this guy, what I would do is just go to YouTube and do a search on Elon Musk and listen to some of the really smart conversations that he's having. And you can't help but be drawn into it. I mean, it's just incredibly smart and gives you a lot to think about. And through his companies, he's literally revolutionizing the world, whether it be rocket ships or automobiles, or now as it relates to digital media and the First Amendment and how all that plays out. It's going to be so fascinating. But I spent a lot of time on X, and one of the things I look at, for example, is at SuperTalk Mississippi News, where a lot of news gets posted. You can post stuff on other platforms, and you'll get some engagement. The problem with Instagram, or especially Facebook anymore, is that in order to get any traction at all on anything you want to post, they require you to pay. they want you to pay to boost. Otherwise, they'll kind of subdue your post. I've also learned, as you know, because you're a columnist for SuperTalk Mississippi News, I can post something that doesn't include a link back to something like SuperTalk, which I believe in their algorithm they've identified as a conservative something. And if I do a post that relates to SuperTalk News or anything related to SuperTalk, and there's an attachment from SuperTalk, it doesn't get nearly the play. But if I don't do it as a link and maybe as a photo, it suddenly it's getting a lot of views, or it's getting a lot of engagement. You can post a story. I'm just looking at one particular post. This is the post that was posted yesterday, or actually this is Wednesday, so it was posted on Monday. Monday. It's when Leonard Bentz was involved in a controversy around illegally baiting turkeys, and got some play on Facebook. And as of just looking at this now, 14 hundred people have engaged with it on X. But that's just one example. I could give you a ton of other examples. There's sports story examples where, I mean, when our sports team, they're so darn good. When they post something, it just goes absolutely bananas. Here's one that's got over 4,000 engaged in it and whatever. But Twitter's kind of opened it up a little bit. And by the way, as it relates to TikTok, which I have serious problems with TikTok, and I can't believe we can't get our heads around it. What they've done, TikTok has opened it up, bro. So they've let small businesses be able to use it without having to spend money, and they're building their business based on TikTok. So they've made it sticky. They made it sticky with young people. They made it sticky with small businesses. So it's going to be hard for America to extract that from anybody. That's why I think the change in ownership has to happen as it relates to that. I mean, when you think about TikTok, does it still seriously concern you?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I mean, it's actually been interesting to me because you could argue there are not any issues that you can point to that really have bipartisan support right now. And what Congress has been doing, cracking down on TikTok, has truly been bipartisan. So it goes to show just sort of the danger signs that are flashing there. And, as always, government and regulatory groups are behind the technology. I mean, TikTok has sort of put its claws deeply into American society. These data issues are extremely concerning, as they are with all social media, but especially with TikTok, considering its ownership and where that data is going. And so, but look, there again, like I said earlier, you take us as a snapshot in time. We were of this generation that kind of were the early adopters of social media. We wake up 10 years from today, the social media framework that we have been used to will be no more. It is evolving before our eyes. And government right now is kind of struggling to keep up with where all this is going. And the power that these companies have is incredible. To what you were alluding to, I didn't have the level of appreciation for the way the algorithms can either, sort of put an exclamation point behind some of these posts or hide them in the corner until I started doing some writing for SuperTalk Mississippi News. And it just becomes so incredibly obvious to you the way that it is manipulated behind the scenes. And, what we're seeing in society right now is the incredible pushback because people are sick of the gatekeepers. There is this incredible amount of cynicism against either people or companies that want to be gatekeepers of information and narrative. And all of that's playing out in front of our eyes and in front of our public policy. You start adding technology, you start adding AI to that, and the way that's going to change everything about us. These are going to be some of the biggest public dialogues and discussions that we're going to have in America over the coming decade. There's no question about it. And then
given this is an election year, the gatekeepers, the bias of the gatekeepers is so it's been there, but it's at a feverish pitch now. And I think for that reason, X plays a bigger role. It plays a bigger role because it's going to be getting more information out there. But it's people don't like it. People don't have a belief in media today. They tend to lean toward their tribe. They can easily find that if they want to find that. It's very troubling. So it's going to be a painful, buddy. It's going to be a painful election season. I'm just telling you, it's going to be so painful. And then you got JFK Jr. and his contributions. I was just looking at trending. And he's trending. Yeah. And on any given day, he's trending on any given day. And for people who aren't paying attention to that, they better pay closer attention because he's all in, and it probably will change the outcome of this election.
I think it's the biggest X factor in the election right now, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's so much of the focus in the past several months has been on the Trump and Biden rematch. I don't think people right now can really conceive of the impact JFK Jr., excuse me, RFK Jr. is going to have.
Yeah, I said J. That's my bad. I said JFK Jr. I meant RFK, of course. Yeah,
Jr.
yeah.
And here's the thing about it. I mean, as we get into the summer months, as we get closer and closer to the election, the likelihood, number one, is he is going to get ballot access probably in just about every state before it's all said and done with. As he gets more attention and as his message gets out there, it's going to land with a lot of people. I watched his big interview with Aaron Burnett on CNN, and the thing that I came away thinking at the end of that interview is this guy is going to have more impact than I gave him credit for before I just watched this interview. His vice presidential choice is interesting, Nicole Shanahan, but keep in mind as she gets to be more familiar and you start hearing more from her, this is a young woman who's going to be very appealing to young voters. She's an expert on technology. She's an expert on AI. She's got really an incredible sort of American dream success story. I think she's going to get more attention. And let me tell you, what RFK is saying, his messaging is very solid, and it's going to land with a lot of voters. Now, the big question is going to be, where is he going to pull voters from? Right now, he has some things that appeal both to traditional Democrats and to sort of MAGA Trump voters. And so, the people that believe, boy, he's going to be a spoiler to Biden, I don't know if I fully buy into that, because right now, I think he probably has a lot more crossover appeal. I mean, look, if you're a traditional Biden voter, you're likely not going to be as swayed by his messaging as someone who has been more attracted to Trump's narrative, but may be on the fence about some of his legal issues and some of his other problems. And so, I think he could even be a spoiler for Trump in ways that people are not fully giving him credit for. But one thing I think I can say for certain right now is he is going to have a major, major impact on the outcome of the election in November.
I think he is. Actually, listen, I'll admit something. It hasn't happened often. It's happened rarely. But I'll admit to something. I go to vote. I'm not going to miss voting. And I take my ballot and I start going down the list. And, I'll vote for who I'm voting for. But then I get to that one race. And this doesn't happen often again, but I'm just going to admit it to you that I've done this. And I'm sick of both of those people. I'm sick of both of them. But there's a third candidate. And I say, you know what? It's not going to make any difference. It's not going to make any difference. But I'm protest voting on this one. I've even wrote in a name before, knowing that it's going to make no difference. But I just was so sick of the choices. I decided I'm not voting for either one of them. I'm just going to do. How many people are going to do that in this election cycle? See, we're not talking about that part. That it's not even what he says, what RFK Jr. says. It's just that I am sick of the choices and what's happening in America. I'm voting for RFK Jr. just because I can and I will. And that's going to be my protest vote. Anyway, hey, when we come back on the other side, we're going to continue our conversation with Ashley Edwards. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. My friend Ashley Edwards with us, former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. He's an entrepreneur involved in all kinds of different stuff these days, and he's a contributor to SuperTalk Mississippi News. Actually, let's bring the focus home for a second. This legislative session starts. There usually is a lull in the action. We have a new speaker. There was no lull this year, man. I mean, our speaker, who obviously can compartmentalize incredibly well, came in putting his chairman to work. We know Delbert Hoseman's going to be a hard-working dude. He's going to burn the midnight oil. He's gonna be involved in every single aspect of his area. But they come in, man. They got a peers issue, state retirement issue that has to be dealt with. They've got budget challenges. They know, for example, they've done these multi-billion-dollar economic development projects that have a state piece to it from a financial incentive point of view. They've got Medicaid expansion that they're wanting to really, for the first time, really have a deep discussion about. And I could go on and on. Underneath all of that, you got all these other bills that are happening. I mean, you've got bills that have to do with campaign finance reform that Michael Watson and I talked about last week. You've got one that I care deeply about, which is the public trust doctrine. It's a wildlife bill that says wildlife belong to the people. So it lists a one pager, and have had trouble getting that out of committee or getting people to pay attention to it. It's important because it stops deer breeders who want to sell and transfer white-tailed deer in Mississippi. We can't have it for a lot of reasons. We don't want to destroy the North American wildlife model in Mississippi, and because chronic wasting disease is a real problem. We don't need to be transferring deer in the state. But getting alignment around some important, but not, it's not up there with peers and Medicaid expansion and those things. How many bills are getting just lost in the flow of this session, given how much they bit off? It'll be interesting to see what they get done when it's all said and done.
Well, look, I've enjoyed watching this legislative session. I'm a guy that just likes this stuff. I like the fact that I'm not day to day involved in this anymore like I was in kind of previous parts of my career. Look, it's tough, and the job of these legislators is tough. This has not been a session that has been devoid of controversy by any means, but that doesn't bother me. And I like the fact that you've now got some leaders positioned in various roles that aren't just rubber stamps for the same policy, because I truly believe that the debates that occur and the tough process of getting to some level of alignment around public policy is necessary to get a better product in the end. And so I welcome the disagreement. I welcome the debate, because I think ultimately it creates better outcomes. Along the same note in what you just said, there's been some good legislation that hasn't made it through. I think of some things particularly. I've been really impressed by State Senator Jeremy England from Jackson County and some of the legislation that he's written. And I read a lot of these bills and some things that didn't get taken up just because they got lost in the hustle and bustle of some of these bigger issues. But I like the fact that these things are starting to see the light of day in the legislature. I've enjoyed listening and watching the new Speaker of the House. I think he's doing a great job. And I think Mississippi is ultimately going to be better for this. And, hey, this next month is going to be as exciting of a month in the Mississippi legislature as we have seen in a generation in terms of some of these big issues that are being taken up. And oftentimes people will look to see what dies on the legislative calendars, and they kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, oh, well, but keep in mind, a lot of times things will take several sessions year to year to really start to get into the popular vernacular up there. And things that we saw die on the calendar this year will almost certainly be back up next year, and we'll get more consideration and debate. And so the fact that there's so many things being talked about right now, this is going to be an interesting 4-year term, I think, of the Mississippi legislature. And we're probably going to see more change and more things done legislatively than we've seen in a lot of other 4-year terms over, really a generation or so. So I think this is an exciting time for legislative watchers. I don't know how many of those people are out there. Nerds like me like this stuff. But for people that are out there that don't pay a lot of attention to what the legislature is doing, they're tackling some big issues, and this is a time to pay attention, I think.
I wish as it relates to Medicaid expansion, I wrote a piece about it. When Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann came out and said we're gonna tackle this, he was the first one of the big three to actually say that. And I wrote a piece and said, it's time for us to have the conversation. Of course, Jason White went forward with it. I wish we would have said we need to solve. I wish that the governor would have put into place sort of a Katrina-like effort. That's what I think needed to happen, and say, okay, what is it going to take to solve healthcare problems in our state, and what role does Medicaid play in that? To do Medicaid expansion as a one-off, it's hard to look at it in the vacuum because there are so many other pieces to it. It's so complicated. I think SuperTalk, I think Gerard in particular has done a super job of talking about this. I think that Paul's done a great job of doing this. we're not just towing the party line. We're saying, listen, we're Mississippi. 51% of us live in rural areas. We got to solve some problems. We got to have conversations before we weren't willing to have for political reasons. And at least we're having the conversation. So anyway, Ashley, thanks for visiting with me today, my friend.
Ricky, thanks. It's always good to be on with you, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's been fun catching up. I enjoy sessions with you. Listen, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.